kids.
This is Learning to Dad
I'm the cool dad. That's my thing.
with Tyler Ross.
What I do have are a very particular set of skills.
I'm gonna have fun, and you're gonna have fun.
All right, hey there, this is Tyler Ross, Learning to Dad with Tyler Ross, and I'm here today with Dr. Brooke Miller, friend for a long time. As we were just talking about, we met when I was in high school, which was 20 years ago. But you are a family medicine doctor in Luray in Little Washington, Virginia. Well, technically Washington, Virginia. We know it as Little Washington. You are a parent to 4 children. You have 3 grandchildren, I believe.
4 grandchildren.
4 grandchildren.
Yeah.
And on top of that, you have a long lineage of being a cattleman.
Yeah.
So thanks so much for being part of this today.
Well, thank you, Tyler. I really appreciate this. Just your intro. I want to just give our viewers a little bit of history on Washington, Little Washington.
I would love that because I need that history too.
Back when my father was a boy, each town had a school. There was Sperryville, Flint Hill, Washington, Woodville. They all had schools. And Washington, Virginia was the county seat. And probably the people in Washington, Virginia thought they were a little superior to the people in Sperryville. Mm-hmm. And so the people in Sperryville, as a dig, nicknamed Washington, Virginia, Little Washington. So it was actually a dig.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I remember when I was in school, I went to school at Highland, as you might know, and people used to call it Little Washington, and I would get really mad.
Yeah.
I mean, really
no
mad.
Kidding. Yeah.
And David Norden, I know you know David Norden. We were
Sure.
friends in grade school, and he used to know that it would get me mad, and he would try to get me really mad by calling me like some farmer hick.
Which wasn't totally untrue, right?
Not untrue at all. Not untrue at all. But Little Washington was actually a dig at the residents of Washington, Virginia from Sperryville. Yeah. And not until the inn at Little Washington became, a name, mm-hmm. was it known as like an adoring trait, Little Washington.
Yes,
so
it
started out as a dig.
I had no clue. That's so funny.
Yeah.
And to relate to that a little bit, my in-laws grew up in Gainesville, mm-hmm. and they knew Lake Manassas as the reservoir. Mm-hmm. Now Lake Manassas is Little Washington. It's the beautiful place that everybody wants to live or go to in that particular area. I did not realize you went to Highland, though.
Oh, you didn't?
No.
Yeah, I went to Highland.
So you were...
All of my brothers went to Highland. I went to Highland.
And so at what point did your family establish roots in Rappahannock County?
About 9 generations ago.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what's it like growing up in a place where, Rappahannock's small now. There's not to my knowledge, there's not a single stoplight there. So I can only imagine, growing up there as a child, how rural and how small that must have felt.
Yeah, nobody knew where Washington, Virginia was when I grew up.
Mm-hmm.
Now a lot of people know about it, where it is. But when I grew up, you tell them you're from Washington, Virginia, nobody had a clue. And now it's like, I guess because of the inn at Little Washington, everybody knows about it because people from all over the world go there. But it was definitely small town America. It was the country. It still is the country, but it was really the country back then.
Do you still live on the farm that you grew up in? Or
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
No kidding. And
Yeah.
that's been a generational farm. Ginger Hill Angus .com is the website, right?
Yes, gingerhillangus.com. The farm that I and my wife and I live on was purchased by my mom and dad mm-hmm. In 1961 or 62.
Yeah.
But the other part of the farm, Ginger Hill Angus, was what my grandfather has owned since 1947. Mm. Yeah.
That's so cool. I appreciate a multi-generational growth in one area, being only the first generation.
We're too stupid to leave.
Well, so So you left, I mean, at least the area for college. You went to Tech and then UVA for medical school. Is that correct?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So how'd you feel leaving that small little town to go to, I don't know how many students Tech had then.
It had about 20,000 when I was there. Yeah. I was excited. It was awesome. My brothers took me to a football game when I was still in high school, and it's like, this is where I want to go.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. And then, so your family profile is you and two brothers?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yeah.
And then you went to Tech, studied, I assume, pre-med or biology.
Well, I went to Tech to actually be a veterinarian.
Yeah.
And once I got down there, my roommate, a guy that I befriended, he was a sophomore and I was a freshman. We befriended him. We sort of, it was in the quarter system. Second quarter, I moved in with him.
Okay.
And he just happened to be a pre-med student. And his father was a surgeon, a burn surgeon at MCV. And we started hanging out, and I got interested in medical school. And, you know, everybody's got an advisor, a curriculum advisor. I didn't even go see my advisor because he had it all lined out, and I just did what he had done the year before.
But up until then, your entire life, you grew up on a farm working with cattle.
Yeah.
I make an assumption that was your plan, was to continue working the farm.
Yeah.
And go be a veterinarian in the area.
Yeah. I loved it. You know, I spent a lot of time with my dad. We had that in common. I just loved going out on the farm and, you know, checking cattle, looking at things, just being outside. And one day I don't know how old I was. I was probably not more than 10 or 11. He said, "What do you want to do when you grow up, son?" I said, "I want to raise cattle, Dad." Yeah. He said, "You better find a damn good job."
And that's when it was time to go thinking about.
Yeah, I always knew that I had to do something else in order to be able to afford to be. They call it a gentleman farmer, but I don't think. Sure. I mean, I guess the gentleman farmer doesn't get his cow shit on his hands all the time like I do.
Oh, you're in it. I know that you.
Yeah, no, I'm in it, and yeah, it's just one of the things I love to do. There are a lot of things in my life, as you know, that I love to do. I'm pretty multi-dimensional, and that's just one of the things that I love to do. It's a lot. Sometimes it's just too much work, but you know, you take the good with the bad.
And you're also one of the founding members of what's the association called?
United States Cattlemen's Association.
Yeah. And so when did that start, and for what purpose?
It was a spinoff of an association called RKF USA, and I was a member of RKF USA. And the founder of RKF USA was a guy I look up to and still look up to, and there was sort of a squabble in the organization, which direction you're going to go. And so they decided to found a new organization called United States Cattlemen's Association, and sort of naturally went with them. And 2004 or 5, I think, is when we founded that organization. And I wasn't real active for quite a few years because I was doing what you're doing right now, being a dad. But then became more active probably 8-9 years ago, and just sort of moved up through the organization. They identified me as someone that they thought had leadership ability. So
cool.
Sort of natural thing. We have things called fly-ins. Fly-ins are where cattle producers from all over the country come to Washington, D.C. and lobby on behalf of the cattle industry.
Okay.
And being in close proximity to Washington, D.C., I didn't have to fly in. I just drove in. We'd go to all of those and we get to know a lot of great people all over the country. It's amazing the number of people that you get to know just being in the cattle industry and just being active in the cattle industry. The reason we started was basically our industry is dominated by mega corporations that have monopolies, and the prices you see in the grocery store for beef are not reflective of what farmers get and get paid. It's absurd. There are 4 major packing corporations, 2 of which are multinational Brazilian companies.
Oh, wow.
I guess Tyson's is and then there's National Beef, but there's JBS, which is a Brazilian company, Manfred, which is a Brazilian company, and then Tyson and National. And 2 of those companies are owned by foreign countries, and they basically control the protein industry in the world. And, they control our food supply. They don't compete.
Mm-hmm. Probably even subsidized.
They have been subsidized. JBS, the owners and founders of JBS actually have spent some time in Brazilian prison for they got caught bribing the president of Brazil.
Right.
And they used a lot of government money to build their organization, and they basically rob in the United States. They rob wealth out of rural America. Yeah. Because rural America is so dependent on agriculture and the cattle industry. And when farmers or ranchers are making a profit, they reinvest it. They buy tractors, they build buildings, they buy, they hire labor, they expand their operation, they buy pickups. And when they're not doing that, they're just barely making it by. And that's what they've been doing for the last 15, 20 years. It's gotten really, really bad because those 4 companies control about 85% of the protein industry in the world.
Wow.
And they basically just don't compete against one another. There's no competition.
It's really unsettling.
Yeah, and unfortunately, our government sort of helped them do it because they thought, okay, we need cheap food, we need efficiency, and bigger is better and more efficient. And those big corporations have high-paid lobbyists, and they go in and they basically write laws for these congressmen who don't understand it, and they sell them a bill of goods. But since when COVID hit a year and a half ago, is it 2.5 ago? Yeah. Year and a half ago, we saw huge disruptions in the supply chain because these big mega corporation, these big plants were going offline because they had an outbreak in COVID. And we saw a huge disruption in the supply chain. And so what these big companies did was they said, hey, we can't take your cattle, Mr. Feeder. We can't take your cattle. They knocked the price down even lower on the cattle that they were already stealing. And same thing for the consumers. So they said, hey, we don't have any beef, man. You saw beef prices go through the roof. So they were making $1,500 an animal, and they were slaughtering hundreds of thousands of animals a week.
Yeah.
And they're making $1,500 an animal. The profits were absolutely absurd. And the farmers and ranchers were getting screwed, and so were the consumers.
So if you were to give a piece of advice to the average consumer, let's say above average consumer, not your McDonald's consumer, but your grocery store, prepare their own food at home consumer, what would you recommend that they do to support sustainable agriculture?
Find a farmer and buy local.
Buy local.
Yeah, buy local. Because, most farmers and ranchers have been on their ranches and farms for generations. They take great care of the land. We have a saying in agriculture that, we're ranchers, we're farmers and ranchers, we're the original environmentalist. So buy local. You'll support your community. You'll support the economy, the local economy of the community. And
families instead of corporations.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And if you do buy beef from the grocery store, demand where it comes from. Because right now there's so much deception in labeling of beef in the grocery store. They can label it product of the USA when it could be coming from anywhere.
Yeah.
Brazil, Canada, Mexico, Australia, South America. All they have to do to label it product USA is repackage it.
So you recently did a podcast for anybody that wants to get more into the weeds on cattle and the cattle business. What was the name of that podcast?
Angus Underground.
Angus Underground.
Yeah, it's I think it was the second podcast that they produced.
Yeah. Oh, wonderful. Yeah, it was fun to listen to, and I learned a lot. There's some jargon in there that was above my head, but it was fun to listen to because I'm interested in health and food and your commitment as a doctor to health and also as a cattleman. I'd be interested to hear your quick spin when you went very intensely with a carnivore diet for a period of time. And you actually did a podcast also with Dr. Baker, Sean Baker?
Yeah, I did a podcast with MeatRx and also Dr. Sean Baker, who introduced me to the carnivore diet.
Yeah. So for anybody listening, well, actually, I'm going to tee this up for you. I don't know what you're going to say, but I think I know what you're going to say. The carnivore diet, in my understanding, is, of course, mostly beef, chicken, and all these things. But do you perceive or see some agenda from people that are promoting like cricket protein and pea protein and all these other things? Does that feel like it's intentionally there to undercut the meat industry? Or is this just like conspiracy theory stuff that somebody's infiltrated my head with?
Well, everybody wants to make a profit. So people that produce plant food or these big corporations that can basically, plant food is fairly cheap to make, and the profit margins are a lot higher on that. Nutritionally, they're not nearly as dense as protein and fat. And it's people just wanting to make a profit. There are people that are environmental extremists that really believe what they're doing. But, animal agriculture done in the right way is very environmentally sound and whatnot. And they make a lot of false accusations. They're just trying to promote their agenda.
Yeah. So anybody listening, I'd encourage you to check out the podcast of Angus Underground, MeatRx, and Dr. Sean Baker for more on those particular things. But so you graduated from tech. Do you immediately go to UVA for medicine?
Yep. In retrospect, I'm glad I did it, but in retrospect, I needed a year off because I was really tired of studying all the time.
Yeah, sure. I bet.
I don't guess I did study all the time because I had a lot of fun, but it just seemed that way, and it would have been good to take a year off, but I'm glad I got through when I did. I was a pretty young man when I finished my residency. I was 29 years old. I wasn't even 30.
When did you meet your wife, Ann?
Met her
in school.
Yeah, I met her. I met her at the gym at University of Virginia, the August of my second year of medical school.
Yeah, so this sounds like a memory that you have very vivid in your mind. You got to tell me about
How'd you know that?
Just listening to you.
How'd you know that, man? I was playing baseball with some buddies that I grew up with out in Rappahannock. We had a baseball team, and I'd come home and play with them in the summers. And I had broken my finger and dislocated my finger.
Yeah.
And I had my finger in a splint. And this was when I did traditional weightlifting and didn't do the CrossFit that I do now. And I was sitting there and I was on the preacher bench. And I was doing my curls.
Yep.
Like this. And
curls for
in
girls.
Comes this freaking gorgeous woman with this hot candy stripe short shorts. And I just almost my tongue came out of my mouth. So
you probably got a hell of a workout the rest of that time for as long as she was
That's
there.
The first time I saw her, and then I would always go to the gym hoping that she would be there and just trying to strike up a conversation with her. And gosh, I probably had very small, casual conversations with her for 6 months before I asked her out.
Yeah.
I remember she said she remembers this. She was bench pressing, and she was bench pressing, and I was with, you spot people. I went over and I said, hey, you want me to spot you? Yeah. She goes, yeah, sure. And she's spotting, and she looked like she's not breathing. And then so I just said, breathe. And that pissed her off. She thought I was arrogant. They keep telling her she knows how to lift and all that stuff. But I finally won her over. I don't know how I did, but I finally won her over.
Yeah. Do you recall a first date?
The first date?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
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 Did you take her out to eat, go to a movie?
No, we went to see a band.
Oh, right
Yeah,
on.
we went to see a band.
Yeah.
And her impression of me changed dramatically.
She
when we
saw
went
your
on our
dance
first-
moves.
No, it was nothing. She just saw how much of a gentleman I was,
Oh, yeah.
and how polite I was, and I took her home, and I kissed her on the cheek.
Yeah.
Didn't try to get any lip or anything. Definitely no tongue.
Yeah.
And she goes, "Wow, that's pretty good." It says everybody that I've been out with has tried to get in my pants first date or something. You know.
Sure. Yeah.
But no, I mean, I could tell she was special when I first saw her, and then when I got to talk to her and see what kind of person she was.
So you're in medical school. You meet Anne, who is to be your wife. How long after graduation?
We actually got married our fourth year. We started
really?
dating my second year, and we got married our fourth year.
Okay, so did you guys do your residencies in same place, different places?
Well, she was a nurse. She's a registered nurse.
Okay.
And she was in nursing school. And she was actually in nursing school when I was in medical school, and I had no idea she was a nursing student until we started dating.
Yeah.
And then she graduated from nursing school my fourth year, at the beginning of my fourth year. And so then we got married in July of 1985.
Okay.
And yeah, it's all history since then.
Yeah, and so you were in July of 85, you get married. Are you currently working in family medicine in Rappahannock?
No. In July of 1985, I was a fourth-year medical student.
Oh, gotcha. Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so she supported us our first year through her nursing. She started working at University of Virginia on different floors. I think she worked in urology. And so she supported us my first year, and then after my fourth year of medical school, you go through something called the match,
Okay.
which is where you go out and you basically match with a residency program. Mm-hmm. And our first year I did a rotating internship in Newport News, and at Riverside Hospital, and that was a good year. We had our first son David there when we were there, and then we moved to Richmond and completed a family practice residency at Chippenham Hospital Division of Medical College of Virginia.
So how did having David change the dynamic of everything I can only imagine what that effort is, putting in medical school, basically one person. I mean, like what's the disruption that you remember the most?
Well, all I have to say is I have the greatest wife in the world. I did my thing. I concentrated on. I mean, I was a father, but most of the responsibility was on Ann.
Yeah.
And for most of the time, she was raising the kids while I was focusing on my career. Although I was a great father and a great husband, but her primary. So it didn't disrupt my life a whole lot.
Yeah.
To be quite honest.
So which kid was it that you fell asleep during their birth?
It was two of them.
Two of them?
Yeah.
I understand you were on call all night.
No. What happened was with David was I had taken all week off, on baby watch.
Yeah.
And there was a third-year resident who I love and admire named Bobby Stokes. I don't know if you've ever heard of Bobby Stokes. Mm-mm. Bobby Stokes was actually friends with my wife Ann because his little brother Ricky Stokes. You ever hear of Ricky Stokes?
No.
Oh, wow. You're not very much of a University of Virginia basketball fan. Bobby Stokes was a player for University of Virginia. Okay. He was a point guard for him, and he during his freshman year, he had some big shots and beat University of North Carolina in the ACC tournament. And his little brother Ricky was in Ann's grade at Highland Springs High School in Richmond. So anyway, I always looked up to Bobby, and Bobby was 2 years ahead of me in medical school at University of Virginia, and he happened to be doing a family practice residency in Newport News at the same place I was doing it, mm-hmm. and it was his bachelor party.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, Bobby had a bachelor party. We had a bachelor party for Bobby, and we all went out to this bachelor party with Bobby, and I got hammered.
Like you do at a bachelor party.
I got hammered, and Bobby actually brought me home
Yeah.
to my apartment. And I walk in, and I'm inebriated, and Ann says, she's in labor.
Yeah. It's
And
not good time.
I fell asleep.
Yeah.
And then finally, she labored through the night, and I was beside her right all the time, just not awake.
Yep.
And just a little bit before daylight, she woke me up and said it was time to go to the hospital. So I did. I was not intoxicated at that point in time, and thank God, her mother came down from Richmond and was with her, and I went to the call room and went to sleep again. And then they called me about an hour before the baby was born, and I was in the, so yeah, I get a hard time about that. But then the next time we have a pregnancy, Amanda, Amanda, we were in Richmond, and I was, it was a full moon. I remember it was a full moon, late May. And I come home from being on call all night plus working there. So I've been up for 36 hours.
Oh, yeah.
Getting ready to go to sleep. We're getting ready to go to bed. Mm-hmm. And she looks at me and she says, I'm in labor.
And you're sober.
I'm sober, but I'm like punch drunk.
Punch drunk, Yep.
And I'd been up for 36 hours. And so we go to the hospital, and again, I go to the call room and go to sleep. and her mother comes over. But I was there and present for the last two, 100%.
Yeah. So what do you, I mean, being a doctor and going through medical school, like the physical nature of all of this, is, I'm sure, was almost very, I don't know if boring is the right word, but very typical, not unusual at all. Like for me, seeing my kid's head crown out of my wife was like a moving, wild experience because I'd never seen anything like that. So like, what's your memory? Do you remember being moved or it feeling just kind of
children
medical?
were born?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I delivered some children. I delivered a lot of children in medical school and also in residency. But I didn't deliver my own children.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was not going to do that. I would have been too nervous. No, it was amazing.
Yeah.
Absolutely amazing. Yeah.
So, did they let Dad?
Yeah,
cut the
Dad
cord
cut
and
the
all
cord.
that?
Dad cut the cord. Yeah, that was.
Yeah.
I think that was just coming in vogue when I was a new dad. Yeah.
So how you're at this point? Are you back at well, of course you had David and then Amanda a couple years later, and you're living back at the farm, and are you practicing medicine at this point?
In 1989, I finished my family practice residency at MCV, and we moved back to the farm. And I interviewed several places around here. I actually interviewed with Steve Von Elton.
Yeah.
But at that point in time, I wanted to do emergency medicine because I'd done a lot of moonlighting. And in retrospect, I would love to have made that different decision and gone in with Steve because he's a great guy. And they have a great practice. But I ended up doing emergency medicine in Culpeper, where we'd do 12 and 24-hour shifts. Culpeper at that point in time was a small enough hospital where you could do a 24-hour shift and get a couple hours sleep every night. But then we ended up going 12 because it got a lot busier. We were there for a couple of years, and Ella was born in 1991. She was born during a blizzard.
I remember that blizzard.
Yeah,
I lived in Amosville at the time.
Yeah, Dr. Myers was her. It was Myers and Young were together here in Warrenton, and they were together. And she actually was Dr. Young's patient, but Dr. Myers was on call that day, and there was a blizzard, and he said, "You want to have the baby today?" And she said, "Yeah." So she was induced, and Ella was induced, and I was there, thank goodness. And then Henry was born 2 years later during a drought. Dr. Bell. Delivered Henry. And actually, it's interesting because Dr. Bell delivered Ella's first child, too.
Is that right?
Yeah. Delivered Catherine. Delivered Catherine.
Yeah. Bell and Myers delivered my kids also.
Oh, did they?
Yeah.
Yeah, we both think they're awesome.
Great.
Yeah. Ann had a particular connection with Dr. Myers. I think he's just recently recently retired, but we hold him in high esteem.
Yeah, and Dr. Bell moved from Fauquier up to Haymarket, I believe.
Yeah, yeah. When my granddaughter was born, I was obviously there, and Dr. Bell had come in, and I can't believe those guys are spending the night in the hospital still. It's just like at that age, that would be like, I do not want to do that. Spend nights in the hospital.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah, but not to mention having their own families as well.
Yeah.
So how did having kids impact your life the most? Like in terms of not like emotionally, but like practically.
Guys grounded me, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was pretty much a party boy growing up, and marrying my wife was definitely a positive in my life as far as my life direction. But I still was a party boy. But when I got the kids, it's like, okay, now it's serious. You gotta be a good role model, because so many kids see what their parents do.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it was just another step in life, growing up in life and maturing in life.
Did that feel like a switch flip, or did it feel like it's something that kind of needed to be conditioned out of you?
I can't remember.
Yeah.
I don't really remember. But how was it with you?
I was so excited. Like we were planning, and I was it was in that place that I wanted to get married and have kids, and so we got married and had kids, and so my life was kind of designed towards doing that already. So I'd gotten my partying out of the way up until when Sarah and I were together. We had a lot of fun partying, and then we got married, and then suddenly we kind of grew up at that point.
I think it was the same thing with us. Yeah. I thought at some point in time I'd get married, but when I saw Ann and started going out with her, I knew she was the one. It's like, I remember we were at the wedding, and everybody's saying, "Are you nervous? Are you nervous?" I said, "I'm nervous. She might not show up. That's the only thing I'm nervous about."
She did. 4 kids.
Yeah. So. She's an awesome mother. She gets a Mother of the Year award. She still takes care of me, 100% of the time.
Yeah, and now she's got to take care of you, 4 kids and 4 grandchildren now as well.
Yeah, she's got. We've got Ella and Matt's little girl home with us this weekend because they went to New Orleans, and she's a handful, but we love every bit of her.
And so, what's the most distinct difference between raising kids that age and being a grandfather to kids that age?
Well, I remember when my kids were that age, it's like you want them to be perfect.
Mm-hmm.
You want do everything perfect.
Yeah.
And everything you did when you were at that age, you remember it as perfect, but I'm sure it was anything but. So I was a perfectionist with my kids, and I wanted them to be the best they could be at everything they ever did.
Mm-hmm.
And and with your grandkids, you just want to play with them and have fun.
Yeah.
And I wish I was a little bit more like that with my kids, because I was involved in their life tremendously, but I probably was a little overbearing at times.
Did they have some bounce back with you or push back when you were putting the? I don't know.
The boys know. Mm-hmm. The girls, once they hit 15 or 16, Dad didn't know anything.
Yeah.
And I was probably I was probably more involved with them for some reason. Just naturally, I was not in their high school years. I was not coaching either one of my sons.
Mm-hmm.
But in the high school years, I was involved in coaching my daughters, and so that probably had something to do with it. I pushed them a lot. I pushed them really hard, and it wasn't until they went to college, then came back that they say, "Hey, Dad's not so bad after all."
Yeah. No, I'm being introduced to that world now, coaching my kid, and my dad was, of course, my coach in a lot of sports, and it was the best thing and one of the worst things at the same time.
Absolutely.
So do you have any advice for me and anyone else in my position in terms of coaching my kids? So that
I can. There's one thing that stands out in my mind that did me a world of good. I was coaching my son David. I was in Little League. I coached all of them. Before I was talking about in high school, but in Little League, I was coaching David's baseball team, and I was one intense dude.
Yeah.
I mean, you've been around me. You know how intense I am.
Sure.
Too intense, and the kids were not performing, and I was just on them, just obnoxiously on them. Well, my wife happened to be videotaping the game.
Yeah.
And we went home and watched the videotape, and I was literally embarrassed at my behavior.
Wow. Yeah.
It's like, you got to be kidding, man. These are little kids. Why are you? You know, they couldn't. I was so intense on them that they couldn't relax and play the sport. And I realized that. So, you know, give them instruction. Don't take it personal when they don't do everything just like you taught them or like you tried to teach them. Try to let them have fun. They'll play a lot better that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how do you think you can keep a kid coachable, like so that they'll listen to other coaches?
Oh gosh, that's a tough one.
Yeah.
I think if you figured that one out, you'd be the best coach in the world. You know?
Coachability.
Yeah. Yeah. You gotta keep their interest. And the other thing is as a coach, I've remembered that doing it rather than telling them how to do it. In other words, get them to practice over and over and over the proper way to do something, as opposed to just telling them. Nobody's,
showing.
Yeah, showing and letting them practice that.
What's a skill that you particularly enjoyed passing on? Or teaching?
As far as coaching?
Anything really. Could be writing, coaching, swinging, whatever, birthing calves, anything that.
Everything. I'm just a natural born coach and a teacher. I just everything that I'm interested in and passionate in, I try to pass it on to anybody that's interested, to be quite honest. Anybody that's interested, whether it's my kids, friends, people that, that want to learn about this or that. I'm just, medical students, nurse practitioner students. I like teaching. I really do.
You a good student?
Oh yeah.
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 Anxious for information and.
Yeah. Yeah. I was a good student in everything, whether it be sports or academics. I would watch the best of the best on TV and then go out and try to emulate them. I'm sure you were that kind of guy.
Absolutely.
Try to emulate somebody and do something like that they do.
Yeah. Yeah. So now that your kids are grown, how do you feel your role as a dad has changed from raising kids to having adult children?
Well, first of all, my kids teach me stuff all the time.
Yeah.
And so it's a two-way street now. And growing up, the kids taught me a lot of stuff, how they acted, handled themselves. So it's more of a two-way street now. And if I have something that I see that's going on that I want them to know, you just have to be a little more subtle about it. Don't beat them over the head, but just sort of try to get your point across where they'll be more receptive to it.
Okay, well, this goes back a little bit to the sports and your kids and everything, but I've been instructed to ask about the going to the car speech after a softball game.
Who told you about that?
I might have done a little inquiries with you kids. Ella might have suggested.
Ella might have told you that. I coached both of my. For 1 year, I had the girls on the softball team. We had a softball team, and I also had boys on the baseball team. And the girls would come to the boys' games, and the boys would come to the girls' games. And my boys were out there, and we weren't doing real well. And so I called timeout and called everybody into the mound or the rubber. It was a flat field, wasn't a mound then, but and I got a little rough on them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Probably used some words that you shouldn't use around kids. And well, first of all, let me back up. The girls actually, I did it to them first time. They weren't playing well, and I walked out and told them, I said, you know, they were little girls. I wasn't going to use rough language with them. And I said, you guys are not concentrating. You're not focusing. You're not playing well. I said, if you guys don't start focusing and playing better and trying at this a little better, I'm going to go to the car and I'm just going to the car. So then the next week, the boys were doing the same thing, and I went out and I was getting on them big time in a undertone, you know. And I walk off the field, and Ella looks at me and said, "Dad, you give them the going to the car speech?"
A version of that.
Yeah, I said, "Yeah, Ella, I gave him it wasn't going to the car speech. It was, I'm going to kick your butt."
That's great. That's
Yeah.
great. The little gold you get from your kids 15 years later.
Oh my gosh, Ella's got so many Ella-isms. We've got so many Ella-isms. It's incredible.
Yeah.
The things that she would come up with and talk about.
So you grew up on the farm. The kids grew up on the farm.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think is the biggest difference in the context of raising your kids and the way you were raised? Like, you're in the same place, but it's different times.
Well, I always had it a lot harder than my kids. Well, no, we tried to raise them pretty similarly.
Yeah.
They had responsibilities. They grew up on the farm. They grew up working. They grew up working with Dad on the farm. And the same thing that I did with my dad. It was a lot of time. It was time well spent. They didn't realize it was time spent with Dad at that point in time. They thought it was just work. Mm-hmm. But now they look back on it, and you know, they used to. Not a lot. They were good. They were good kids, but there were some jobs that they would complain about that weren't the most pleasant jobs, like using creosote on a board fence where they'd get it all over them.
Yeah.
Remember, Henry got it all over him one time. We just had to shave his head all, shave all the hair off of him. So it was very similar.
Yeah.
Very similar, just a little bit further, more technically advanced, you know, from when I was a kid versus when they were kids.
So,
And now that it's funny because, you know, they all bring their friends home. At least they did during college. They'd bring their friends home, and their friends would tell me about stories that they told their friends. And it was like, I thought you hated that, but they were like using it as a red badge of courage, you know, that they had to do this or had to do that. Mm-hmm. So I think it was pretty similar.
Yeah. Yeah. How about, I mean, you and I could go down the rabbit hole pretty quickly on things, but let's say in the world, the context of the world, raising, of course we can go back in time, so we don't have to talk about now. We can talk about the 90s. But how different was it raising kids in the 90s versus when you were being raised as a kid? Like, what do you think is the biggest difference?
God, it was huge. It was, you know, in the 90s and even more so now, you have to be so much more worried about safety and what's going on in the world.
Yeah.
Especially with social media and the internet. But you know, when I was growing up, we were just wild dogs, man. My dad we'd go out and we had to make our own entertainment. Yeah. And we'd have our bikes and we'd go out into town and we'd meet our friends. And this was actually Washington, Virginia was actually a residential town. Now it's more of a tourist town. Mm-hmm. But we had our friends in town, and we'd meet up every day, and we'd play baseball or football or hunt and, you know, hide and seek at night or army tag or something like that. And we would leave home. We'd come home from school or we finish working during the day. We'd leave home and wouldn't come home till late at night. And if my dad wanted us, he had this amazing ability to whistle really loud, and you could hear it all over town. And he would just whistle. And it's like, oh, time to go. See you guys.
Miller kids, time to go.
Yeah. Whereas my kids, I knew where they were all the time.
Yeah.
Just about all the time. I'm sure there were times where they told me they were someplace and were someplace else. Who knows? Mm-hmm. But I pretty much knew where they were all the time. And now it's even much more so. I mean, but we just roamed when I was a kid.
Yeah.
It was fun. It was a lot of fun.
What do you think was the more well, okay, so that sounds like an advantage Brooke.
Yeah.
So what about disadvantage? What do you think is the advantage that they have that you would have liked to have had as a kid?
Oh, well, I lived in Washington, Virginia. I mean, we were the last place to learn about anything. We didn't have social media. There was no internet. There was no nothing. I mean, we were the hicks from the sticks.
Yeah.
And country kids now, because of the connectivity, have all the advantages of living that city kids had. Except even more, they enjoy a little more personal freedom because it's traditionally a little safer to grow up in the country as far as predators and things like that.
Yeah, yeah. How about differences in like the evolution of how kids are punished, like growing up?
Oh, yeah. You touch your kid now, you get reported to social service.
Yeah, yeah. Did you get spanked as a kid?
With a belt.
Yeah, yeah.
And I didn't grow up hating my mom and dad.
Yeah.
My mom washed my mouth out with soap a couple times. But my dad, he was the disciplinarian.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But I might have spanked my kids once or twice, but I felt bad doing it. I couldn't do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. My wife would have a little, plastic spatula, and that would just scare the heck out of them because she would smack them on the wrist or the butt with that.
Yeah.
But I don't think my kids, they've ever spanked their children.
Yeah. Yeah. Of being of similar generation, the only thing I've ever done is bite my kid harder than he bit me. Just pop him on the butt every now and again to remind him of something. But yeah, that's a big difference. But it sounded like you had a tremendously respectful relationship with your dad and spent a lot of time together. And,
oh gosh, yes. He was my hero.
That didn't create any problems.
No, didn't create any problems at all. He was my hero. He probably went overboard a couple times on the spankings, but I wasn't scarred emotionally by any stretch of the imagination. I just didn't do it again.
Yeah, yeah. It seems like pretty effective causal.
Yeah, it was effective. It was effective. It's just, there are a lot of great things about present day, but there are really a lot of screwed up things about present day.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So looking back, what are some of the milestones you remember for your kids?
Milestones for my children. Obviously, when they started walking.
Yeah.
When they started talking.
You remember any first words?
Any what?
Any of their first words?
No, I don't.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I don't remember.
Do you remember first words of your children?
I don't. No.
Well, it's probably like mama, daddy.
Yeah. No, I have more vivid memories of like a couple weeks ago. I referred to something as being particularly difficult in my own expressive way, and my daughter said, "Yeah, that is fucking hard." Those are the words I remember.
Yeah, I probably say that word way too many times, and I really, now that my grandchildren are growing up, I really, that's one of my faults is my trash mouth.
Yeah,
and I try to work on that.
Has it?
My oldest son David is really. Anytime someone says any curse word around one of his children, he goes, language.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, you're right. I need to watch my language.
Yeah, they hear everything.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So anything else that kind of jumps into your head in graduation or wedding? My gosh, you've walked 2 daughters down the aisle.
Well, the particularly emotion times for me was when each one of them went to school for the first time. They're out of the house, went to school and then it was when they went to college. And then, weddings. Those are the 3 big milestones. When they first went to school, when they went to college, and when they got married. Yeah.
So how's the transition? I mean, you meet your wife, you're married, and you're together for a couple of years before you start having kids, and then you go 30 years of having at least one kid in the house, and now empty nest. Like, what's that transition like back to not having a house full of rowdy country hicks?
It was gradual because, we had 4.
Yeah.
And then we had 3. Then we had 2. Then we had 1. Then we had none.
Yeah.
So it was sort of a gradual thing. It wasn't like you had one child, and then all of a sudden you didn't have any children. So it was sort of a gradual thing. But they still come back, and we never have a completely empty house, hardly.
Yeah.
Ever have
That's
a completely
awesome.
empty house.
So, do you still feel like a dad?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I'll forever be their dad.
Yeah. Yeah. How about what do the grandkids call you?
Papa.
Papa. So what's it like being a papa?
It's awesome.
Yeah.
It's awesome. Yeah.
What are you excited to teach those kids?
Oh, gosh. Everything I can, sports, morality.
Mm-hmm.
Just, I think they learn that. I learned so much from my father just by watching and observing, and I think they learn a lot from that, just watching and observing, being a good citizen, a good person, someone who helps others, gets joy out of helping others, that kind of stuff. And they pick it up. I mean, the things that I learned from my dad are innumerable. But the biggest thing, he was a public figure. He was chairman of the board of supervisors in Rappahannock County when he was 29.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Wow.
And very instrumental in Rappahannock County's zoning laws and why Rappahannock County is still rural and not a bunch of stoplights like you talk about and whatnot. And we like it like that. But I would go to I went to a couple of public meetings with him. And, if you're in a public servant, if you're a elected official, you catch a lot of grief.
Oh, yeah.
And I would just remember at meetings, some people, not everybody, but some people would just literally attack him.
Yeah.
And
wow.
Yeah, and he would just always keep his cool, and he would never respond with anger or attack someone personally, but he would just stick to basically the facts, and that was profound. I think not reacting, but responding rationally.
Yeah, that requires a certain. I'm going to load it because I want to get to the word resilience, but requires a certain level of comfort with yourself, which I think is a product of being resilient.
Yeah.
So how important do you think it is for, how do you think you can teach resilience?
It's a process, Everybody's going to fall. Everybody's going to fall. It's just you get back up. It's just a process. I think you do it by example. And then, when you need to tell, if you want someone you're trying to teach, you talk to them about it in a rational manner. But I think it's mainly people learn most of the stuff they learn by observation. And I just think that being a good example, they'll observe it a lot.
Yeah, being the example. So what's an example that you're proud to, like a particular characteristic or trait that you're proud to have to be the example for?
I'm an independent thinker.
Yeah, awesome.
I don't take. Someone says they don't like this person. That doesn't affect my opinion of that person. I let my personal interaction with that person form my opinion, and it's just like science. I mean, everybody's talking. Nowadays everything's crazy as far as science. They use follow the science all the time, and they're really not following the science. And just being able to think independently and form your own opinion on analyzing a situation, as opposed to just taking what most people are saying.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. So and that's another thing that I observed from my father. He was an independent thinker, and you got to have self-confidence in your own abilities and your own mindset and your own ability to analyze the situation, because it's a heck of a lot easier to be wrong if everybody else is wrong with you.
Right.
But if everybody else is thinking one way and you're thinking someone else, and you're thinking, what happens if I'm wrong? If I'm wrong, I'm the only person wrong. And it takes someone with a lot of self-confidence and self-respect to be willing to take an opinion or take a position that they truly believe in that everybody else doesn't believe in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's particularly a poignant thing to say given the the days these days. I want to jump into some kind of rapid fire questions as we near almost an hour.
Mm-hmm.
The first one is, how do you think your kids would describe you?
Stern but fair.
There you go. I like that. Money is no object. Time, space, no object. What gift would you give to every father on the planet?
I never even thought about that.
Yeah. That's why I like
a healthy
that.
child.
Healthy child. Love it. When in your life do you feel the most love?
When I'm with family.
Yeah. Doesn't matter what you're doing, just together.
Mm-hmm.
What are 3 characteristics that a super dad has to have?
Patience.
Mm-hmm.
Time.
Mm-hmm.
Patience, time. Oh, gosh. You help me out on this one.
I mean, 3, limiting it to 3 is difficult, but
Patience, time, and willingness to put your child's needs above your own.
Yeah.
I think that's the big
Selflessness.
one. Yeah, selflessness. Yeah.
I was going to go enthusiasm, but selflessness I like better. All right, so the billboard question. You're on 211, 29, 66, going 100 miles an hour. You got a billboard. You got to deliver a message, a piece of advice to every dad that goes by that just has to crank his neck to check out what it says quickly. So what's that little piece of advice that you would fit on that billboard?
Be a good example.
Perfect. Is there a TV dad or a fictional dad that you like?
Who was the guy that had My Three Sons?
Oh my gosh, I don't know.
Bill McMurray, or Ed McMurray, or something like that.
Yeah, that's
the father in My Three Sons. That was probably a little before your time.
It was. I don't know it.
Okay.
All right. And then this will be our last question. So thank you again for being here. I had a lot of fun talking with you, and I'm excited to share this. I think a lot of people get a lot out of it.
Okay.
Presumably, though the pyramids will one day be forgotten, this recording will last for a very, very long time, for generations of Millers to come, and perhaps 5 or 6 generations from now, there's a family sitting on the porch of the Ginger Hill Angus Farm and listening to this. What is something you'd like for everybody in the family to hear?
Gosh, you put it that way. I don't know. I mean, you really put me on the spot there with, potentially my great-great-great-grandchildren listening to.
Mm-hmm.
Rephrase that question.
So generations of Millers,
Mm-hmm.
something from you to them on anything.
Have a purpose in life.
Yeah.
Yeah, everybody needs a purpose. If you lose your purpose, have a purpose in life.
I like that.
And the other thing is everybody wants to find happiness. And the best way to be happy is do something good for somebody else. Mm-hmm. That's the way I've found. I get a lot more happiness by giving than I do by receiving. That's for sure.
That seems like a wonderful way to advance humanity.
Yeah, it is. I mean, if everybody felt that way, it'd be a lot greater world. I mean, I enjoy nice things and whatnot, but I think everybody, if you do something good for somebody and you see what it does for them, I think what you get out of it is equal or better than what you do when you give somebody, than the person that gets it. I mean, their response so often is awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's one of the good things about being a doctor is, when I first was a doctor, when I first got out of medical school and residency, I sort of took it for granted. Mm-hmm. And now that I've had these patients for, 20, 30 years, they really put you up on a pedestal, and they trust you.
Yeah. I do what my doctor tells me. I've heard many a time.
Yeah, well, they trust you. And that's one of the things that's made this pandemic so difficult for me, because sometimes I say things to my patients and give them opinions that aren't always what the mainstream narrative is.
Mm-hmm.
But I can't lie to them. I mean, they trust me. I can't say what somebody else wants me to say. I have to say what I truly believe in my heart. So, yeah, that's pretty.
The burden of being an independent thinker with purpose.
Yeah, it is. It is
Mm-hmm.
it is a burden. I mean, you could just you just go along with everybody, go along and get along. But you figured out that I'm not that kind of guy.
So, all the Millers on the front porch of Ginger Hill Angus Farm, you come from good stock.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I
Thanks.
appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you for the time.
Thank you for asking me. I feel honored to be on your podcast. I saw you as a young, a high school student. I've seen you grow, and have the greatest respect from you. And you coached my son Henry in JV basketball, and he thinks the sun rises and sets in Tyler Ross. And
I never would have thought it. I adore Henry. You two beautiful daughters I adore as well.
Yeah.
And David I don't know very well, but I've always enjoyed our interactions.
yeah. So no, Henry loves Tyler Ross.
That's
He
awesome.
talks about him today.
I love it.
And I appreciated the great job that you guys did with them,
Thanks.
because they weren't a very good team.
No, they weren't at all.
And you were a good coach, and I
thanks.
thought you did a great job.
Yeah, thank you.
I think it was you, and was it Reynolds?
It was me. I think it was me and Reynolds. Yeah.
And was there another person too? Wasn't there a third person?
I'm going to feel whoever it is, I hope they don't listen to this and hear the recording of it.
Yeah. Okay. All right. No, you guys did a great job, because they were young and not early maturing kids, and no, Henry loved it. So I appreciate it. I have the ultimate respect for you.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I know you're going to be a great dad. I know you're probably already still a great dad.
Talking to people like you to be better every day.
Thank you.